All right, good morning. Welcome to the February 13th, 2023 Grants Pass City Council Workshop and special meeting today. We are going to start off with the Budget Committee orientation and then do the public hearing on the PERS retirement and then jump back into our workshop. So, Aaron, let's get started with Budget Committee.
Great, thank you, Mayor, Council, and members of the Budget Committee. Welcome. So this is going to be a tag team, sort of like the old WWE wrestling. You know, I'm going to come in and then Hacksaw JC is going to come up and take over here. So the outline of today's presentation is we're going to talk what is a budget, how do we fit into the budget, both staff and council and the Budget Committee. How do we get to a proposed budget? What is the budget structure? What are the important details? How do I read the budget document so you have an idea what you're looking at and how to decipher that? And then also, how do you read the capital budget document? So a budget is truly a legal document. It makes lawful appropriations that gives the city the authority to spend public money through the process that we have. It's a financial plan for the city for one fiscal year. Some cities have 2-year budgets, but we have a 1-year cycle budget. It's based on estimates and revenues and expenditures to the best of our knowledge. Some things we're pretty solid on and some things we have to do estimates. It's an internal control mechanism, making sure that we're keeping in line with what the appropriations are for each individual division and department. It is also a policy document. If you really look at what the budget is, it follows council's policies and where council wants to go with regards to delivering services for the community. And it is a public communication tool. It expresses the city's goals to the citizens. So who makes the rules and why do we have this process? Is this something we can change? Well, the majority of our process when it comes to the budget is something that is defined under Oregon revised statutes. So there is a process and a procedure, and across the state of Oregon, the majority of municipalities, local governments operate the same way when it comes to their budget meetings. And our rules that I just talked about before are basically mirrored off of Oregon revised statutes and what's required. The budget process starts with the budget officer, who's the city manager, and city staff, who prepares a proposed budget. The Budget Committee reviews, revises, and approves the budget, and then that becomes the approved budget. After that, it then goes to City Council, where they hold a public hearing, and then it's ultimately adopted. Each one of those steps and the meetings associated with each one of those steps is a public meeting. This is just a little diagram of sort of how it works. Goes from the proposed budget from a staff perspective to then the approved budget through the council and community input through the Budget Committee, and then ultimately adopting by City Council. So the Budget Committee members consist of City Council and an equal number of appointees, which are the citizens. Primary roles is to hear the budget message, which you do on the first meeting, hold public meetings, hear public comments and provide input. This is a requirement of each one of our meetings. There'll be an opportunity after staff has provided input and provided information based on the division or department that we're talking about. Council and Budget Committee has questions, and then you do open it up for public comment before you go into deliberation and make motions. You review and discuss the proposed budget, you make revisions, and here are two important parts of the Budget Committee. You do make a recommendation to approve each tax rate and approve the budget. As mentioned, each one of these meetings will be a public meeting, and they're therefore subject to public meeting law, and a quorum is required to conduct business, and a majority is required to take action. You hear public comments. The budget is a public document once it's released to the Budget Committee. So we're working on, right now, we're working on budget numbers, etc. And Hacksaw JC has been working really hard at getting those numbers together for us so we can take a look at that. And then once we have the document actually in our hands and printed, as soon as we get it ready for you and provide it to the Budget Committee, then it is a public document. The committee must take public comment. Each of the public hearings is mentioned, and any member of the public may speak. So from a time commitment standpoint, this is what we're looking at. Our first budget meeting is scheduled for May 2nd, with other dates for May 9th, 11th, and 16th. And at that May 2nd meeting, we'll be nominating and electing a budget chair and a vice chair, which will facilitate the meeting. You'll adopt ground rules for the Budget Committee. You'll receive a proposed budget and hear a presentation of the budget message. We'll talk about the strategic plan and the capital allocations and review some of those, and then set the schedule for future meetings. I'm not going to go in detail about the strategic plan as much as I will at the first budget meeting, but the strategic plan is the thing that does drive the budget, because the strategic plan sets our policies and our goals, which are directed by council. It is a process. It's a year-round process. We start before the holidays by getting input from our advisory committees, from our citizens, from staff, from council, and we go through and prioritize all of those items. Once we have that prioritization, staff has the ability to better assess the needs to make those things happen through the work plan, which is then provided through the budget, and then the Budget Committee reviews that to make sure that the allocation of resources are appropriate. We do follow SMART goal format, where it's easy for us to track our goals and objectives. And the 5 goals that we have identified is ensure community safety, provide cooperative shared leadership involving council, staff, and the community, encourage economic opportunities, facilitate sustainable management growth, maintain and operate and expand our infrastructure to meet community needs. And with that, I am going to bring up JC for tagging me out.
Yeah. You know, I'm kind of on the fence if I like the name Hacksaw as a finance director. Maybe people will stop asking me for more money. So why is the budget structured in this manner? So we do have to let you know the basis of accounting. Oregon requires each local government to disclose its basis of accounting. In Grants Pass, we use a modified accrual basis of accounting, which means revenues are recorded when measurable and available. And we do have a 60-day accrual window for those to go backwards. And expenditures are recorded when the goods or services are delivered and or liabilities are incurred. So the budget is organized by fund. A fund is a self-balancing set of accounts used to record estimated resources and requirements for specific activities and objectives. All resources and requirements must be budgeted. All resources and requirements must balance. And all estimates of resources and requirements must be made in good faith. So just as a visual to that statement, you can see the picture on the left has an equal number of resources to requirements. And then on the right, the requirements or expenditures are larger than the resources, which cannot happen. So we have several different fund types. The general fund accounts for all financial resources except those to be accounted for in another fund. We have our enterprise funds, which is water, wastewater, and stormwater, and they account for operations that are financed and operated through dedicated user charges. We have some special revenue funds like transportation and lodging tax that account for funds that are legally restricted in use for a specified purpose. We have capital project funds, which account for resources used for acquisition or construction of major capital facilities. Debt service funds accounts for the accumulation of receipts, usually for improvement projects. Internal service funds accounts for financing of goods and services furnished by one department to another. Most of the time, these are departments that are consolidated, like IT, HR, finance, to provide services to the rest of the departments. Your fiduciary funds is the landfill, and it accounts for assets held by a government unit in a trustee capacity. So a lot of questions when I get through this budget orientation is, well, it works like this in my personal finances or business finances, and with government finances, it doesn't quite work that way. To where, yes, you can have your resources come in and you get to, more or less in the picture here, turn on your different spigots to let that flow out whichever you need. It doesn't necessarily work like that in government. As you can see, I kind of have different funds here in different buckets that all of these resources and requirements go in, and they need to go out in the same manner. So the general fund is slightly different than other funds. That is, handles everything else by definition. So your largest revenue is going to be property taxes. General fund has program and general support resources. Program resources are dedicated funds that are obligated to a program. General support are considered non-dedicated funds, are discretionary and can be used across multiple program areas. And here's a little diagram of the program resources and general support. And you can kind of see as an example here, I have different faucets that you can turn on and different funding levels where we use property taxes and the levy for public safety, which is a program resource. And then you can see there's a small general support. And then all the other departments have a similar requirement. So Oregon law allows local governments to levy 3 types of property taxes. We have 2 here at the City of Grants Pass. We have a permanent rate at $4.13 and change per thousand of assessed value, and we have the local option levy at $1.79 per thousand assessed value. The Oregon Constitution places limits on property tax collection. Measure 5, passed in 1990, limits combined tax collection by general governments to be $10 per 1,000 of assessed value. If the combined rates of all general jurisdictions exceed $10, local option taxes are the first to be compressed, followed by permanent rate taxes. Measure 50, passed in 1997, limits the growth in assessed value to no more than 3% per year for existing properties. And just as an example, I know it's getting cut off here, but you can see in one of our districts or overlapping districts, we have about $8.55 of that $10. And then with the school districts, these are those rates. And I asterisk the 2 Grants Pass School District and the 3 Rivers School District because they don't get applied in the same levy district. Fund balances, the city will maintain adequate fund balances to meet seasonal cash flow, support a good credit rating, to have resources to meet emergency or unanticipated expenses, and to have sufficient resources to begin the next fiscal year. The budget shall provide for an appropriate beginning-ending fund balance. So as a department goal, we also, like departments, are tasked with making an effort to save at least 6% of their operating budgets to help with the ending fund balance. So generally, the fund balance levels are dedicated by cash flow requirements to support operating expenses, relative rate stability from year to year for enterprise funds, susceptibility to emergency or unanticipated expenditure, creditworthiness and capacity to support debt service requirements, legal or regulatory requirements affecting revenues, disbursements, and fund balances, and then reliability of outside revenues. And here are those target fund balances, and you can see the general fund is between 30 and 40%, and that's to allow for the large swing in property taxes, which we don't get those revenues until November. So how do I read the budget document? There is a current adopted operating and capital budget on the website for June 30th, 2023. It is 353 pages. If you would like a paper copy, we can supply that for you. I do have a little handout here that I'll go through, which are the kind of the highlights of those 353 pages and how to read those. So the first section of these 5 pages is how to read the budget and the Oregon budget law. I'm obviously not going to read all of these pages out, but just kind of notating that these are probably areas that you might want to look into. The strategic plan is on page 62 to 71. Key revenue details, pages 44 to 50. And there's some key expenditure, capital budget summary, and long-range financial planning. So the sixth page is this funding matrix, and it's going to look like this. It's on page 28, and that's going to show you the total appropriations for the city, and that the two sides, the money coming in equals the money going out. And then as you flip to the next page, we have the resolution that establishes the appropriation authority for the city. And as you flip to the end of that, for 2023, it's about $192 million. There is other information in there, like the appendix, has statistics, information, glossary, and other. So I highlighted Appendix B, which has a summary of resources and a summary of requirements, and also showing that both sides balance. That looks like this, with the green bars on the top. The next little section in your handout is department program description example. So I pulled the Parks Department, and you can see the different activities, the descriptions, the summary of the costs of those programs, as well as some of their statistics and their own individual goals for each of the departments. And if you flip through several of those parks pages, that'll get you to the general fund details. And I've used public safety as an example here. So we have a history of general fund resources on page 33. You can see the general fund for 2023 got estimated $48 million in change, almost 49. And one thing to keep in mind, the beginning balance of the projected out year, so in this case, fiscal year 24, is the ending balance of 2023. So you can see in this example on page 33, we're about going to spend $2.7 million of fund balance. Then flipping to the next page is the expenditures. You can see that the total should tie. So back to page 33, how to read this kind of left to right. You have 2 years of actuals, the previous budget, the recommended, the current adopted, and then the projected. And again, here's that snapshot of the ending budget, or the ending balance, which is the next year's beginning balance, also on the top of page 33. So as a public safety example, if we flip to the next page, you can see that there are program resources for public safety, about $23 million, and then $3.8 million of that general support, which is the non-dedicated. And within that $23 million is property taxes. And then flipping over to page 159, you can see those dedicated revenues, as well as this is a building services example, so it's a little bit different. So they have all dedicated revenues, and then their contingency line actually starts off their 2024 beginning balance, because the thought is that you're not going to spend contingency. And so that is a different example that's slightly different than public safety. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. So yes, this is the contingency tying, and you couldn't fit it all in one picture here, but you can see it on the handout that I have these red boxes and arrows showing you how to read that. We have an adopted capital budget, and this will be the last page. You can also get a paper copy if you'd like. This is 170 pages. So I have a small main replacement program as the example. So the top shows you the description, the purpose, the need, and the council's strategic goals and costs. And then the bottom is going to show you your resources and requirements, or other known as revenues and expenditures. Well, there's going to be some green around the revenues and red around the expenses. So understanding the timeline here at the top, we have all of the activity through 2021. Then we have the current the previous adopted budget and the current estimated for 2022, which you can see that sometimes we make adjustments. So in seeing that 200,000 is less than the adopted budget. And then we go through and adopt fiscal year 23. And then we appropriate everything in each capital program to give flexibility. And then this also shows the out years of the projected 2024 and then any potential future costs. The total of the project is a sum through fiscal year 23, the projected 24, and any future amounts beyond 2024. So this is going to be true for both resources and requirements. And like a broken record, they balance. The estimated ending balance for fiscal year 22 takes the known ending balance through fiscal year 2021 and adds the estimated resources for fiscal year 2022, then subtracts the estimated fiscal year 2022 expenditures equally for the estimated ending balance for fiscal year 2022. What that means is we use 2022's estimate to start us off for the next year for fiscal year 2023. And with that, I can take any questions regarding the city's budget and or capital budget.
Thanks, JC. Tom has a question over on the floor.
The columns on these charts include fiscal year 22.
Oh, we need the mic, Tom.
Turn this on, green light.
The columns on each of these charts for the history
Yep.
show either budget for fiscal 22 or estimated for fiscal 22. And I believe fiscal 22 has been closed out. So couldn't those columns be the actual?
So yeah, this is an example of our fiscal year 23 budget. So at the time of putting together 23, they were estimates at that point. And so just think that the years are going to tick up when you see the next recommended budget that we'll give you at the beginning of May.
And that will include the actuals for 22?
It'll include the actuals for 22 and then the estimates that we believe for 23.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Guess that's it.
Could I ask one more?
Go ahead.
You mentioned the cash flow requirement from July through November when taxes are paid. And I believe that's about a little over a third of the year. So what is the dollar amount needed for bridging that cash flow? Is it around 7 million?
Trying to think, the total appropriations I think is like 30 million in the general fund, and so approximately a third of that, so a little over $10 million. Yeah, and so we have about a $14 million fund balance as of the end of 2022, start to 2023. So we are in a healthy range as far as policy is concerned, but as we go through time, things get more expensive. We'll probably need to draw down on that fund balance.
Any other questions? All right, I know you have mostly been through this before, so reach out to Aaron or JC if you have questions about what's expected, and then block out your entire month of May as on your calendar. All right, did you have anything more, JC, or are we moving on to PERS?
Unless questions? I don't have anything else unless you guys have any questions, comments.
Okay. In that case, we need a motion to adjourn the workshop and open the special meeting. DJ.
So moved.
Seconded by Dwayne. All in favor of adjourning the workshop, moving into special meeting?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we will open the special city council meeting to discuss the public employees retirement system.
Hello. A lot of this is going to be repeat information from when I presented this back on January 9th, but there is some new information in here. So I'm going to go through a little bit of the background, some PERS information, where the city sits, and an alternate 10-year plan to potentially use the reserve. And then the relationship to council goals is provide cooperative shared leadership involving council, staff, and community. So through the fiscal year 23 budget process, $2 million was identified as being turned over to the state as a PERS side account to help reduce future rate increases, but no clear decision was made at that time. We just have the appropriations to make that contribution. As a PERS update on December 2nd, they were seeing through September 30th a 4.41% loss in investment results. However, the investments of 2021 curbed that potential increase for everybody's PERS rate. And graphically, this is how they presented it. And so assuming an earnings of 6.9%, the rates climb on an average from 25.6 to 25.9, which is that small increase, and then stabilize and slowly decline by 2041 to 2043. And so that 6.9% is the blue line. So we got a PERS update, February 3rd. The rate of return for 2022 closed out at a negative 1.55%. It's substantially less than the assumed rate of 6.9 and is estimated to cause an increase in the system's unfunded liability. The rate increases expected in the 2025 to 2027 biennium due to 2022's investment underperformance. So the side account information, the side account is amortized for over 20 years, or for 20 years, excuse me. Milliman calculates an amortization factor that reflects the current actuarial earnings, which is a discount rate, and determines the amount of the rate offset. So based on the current assumed rate of 6.9%, the amortization factor is between 12 and 15 years. Previously, when I reported this, it was around 12. And so this information has updated on the state's website, and their projections have elongated. So you actually have three options, but you can't do number 3 because we don't have $10 million. Option 1, you can choose the first of any month in a rolling 12-month period, allowing 30 days for actuary to complete the actuarial calculation. If you select this, you have to pay Milliman $1,000 to do that calculation. And then the option 2 is just make a payment in 2023, and your rate offset will be calculated for 2023 and effective on July 1st of 2025. In the meantime, your payment will continue to accrue earnings or losses until the next year-end date, and then the total amount of that date through December 31 of 2023 will be used to determine your rate offset. So on the state's website, there is a tool for the City of Grants Pass to actually plug in their information. And you can see if we contributed $2 million, that's approximately a payback period between 14 and 15 years. We do have a new development, contrary to how it reads on the state's website. We did reach out to the state regarding the Employer Incentive Fund to inquire about the program. So previously, the City of Grants Pass submitted to be part of the EIF. The legislative dollars allocation was provided for counties, cities, school districts, and other districts to help pay for an employer rate relief program for PERS. This program would provide a 25% match to the employer submission for a side account. In the city's previous submission, we were placed on a waiting list. So the City of Grants Pass was notified and approved for an EIF match of $500,000 upon a $2 million side account. It doesn't have to be $2 million. It can be less than $2 million if you so choose, but $2 million is what we are approved for. If you're going to take advantage of this, the funds need to be deposited before March 31st. And then the next estimated return of this program is potentially 2025. Now numerically, this looks like closer to year 12 to 13 is the payback period for your $2 million. So the current city's PERS position, so the new rates are published for the next biennium, and you can see across the board we are going to have a 3% increase on all of our rate tiers. That's approximately a 13% increase in costs, and the estimation is almost $1 million of additional costs to the city in the next budget year, which about 2/3 of that is general fund. Here's how the PERS rates look on a biennium, and you can see since 2010 we've done nothing but steadily go up in PERS rates. And this is an annual look, so since it is a biennium, you can see that we get a jump from year 1, and then year 2 it's the same rate, so it levels off. And I'll come back to this in a little bit. So currently we do use the PERS reserve as a city initiated discount, and in fiscal year 2022 that was about $375,000 back to departments at a 2.75 city discount. And currently, we are giving a 2% discount, which is approximately going to be $350,000. So potentially, the use of the PERS reserve of fiscal year 24, if you do the same 2%, I just estimated around $400,000. You can see those rates side by side. And then the potential use of the PERS reserve in fiscal year 25, which would be 0. And the plan potentially here is graphically to show this as kind of a smoothing out of that tiered look, so that we would take advantage of the PERS reserve in year 1, and then year 2 let it catch back up to its actual expenditures to elongate the PERS reserve. Fortunately, the city changed workers' comp plans recently from a self-insured plan to an annual policy with a fixed premium to control the city's liability risk related to large presumptive claims and injuries, illnesses. So we are holding in excess of a reserve in order to meet the large workers' comp claims. Now, we don't necessarily need that large of a reserve anymore, and we approximately have $1.2 million. So our new plan does cost less. The current internal billings through workers' comp rates are greater than the new premium and other costs. And anybody who understands insurance and mod factors, we're at a 0.6 mod factor for workers' comp, which anything at a 1 is paying for your premium. Anything underneath that means that you aren't utilizing your full premium, which means we're doing a good job of staying safe out there. So there is a net 200,000-ish gain over the last couple of years. So the internal billings, we're billing departments about 600,000, and it's only costing us about 400,000 in premiums. So we can potentially create a similar $400,000 savings to draw reserve balances down. And the savings uses only about 200,000 of the reserve. So kind of the math works out, it would be a $400,000 savings to departments. So a potential 10-year plan for this, which again gives us control and flexibility, would be to use the PERS reserve in the even years to combat biennium PERS rate increases, and then use the workers' comp reserve in odd years to help combat other personnel increases that we're seeing, like medical, dental, vision, and other personnel costs, like the new Paid Leave Oregon Family Act. So with the potential alternative 10-year plan, the city would have control of the reserve amounts, and then this would be continually reevaluated each year. It may not be $400,000 in savings, it may go up, it may go down, but it would give us the control and flexibility. The examples for like this biennium for PERS, if we have a 3+ % PERS rate hikes, $1 million is hard to swallow, especially with some of our other funding issues and new personnel and taxes. So the call to action today would be to provide staff with direction on whether to turn over the budgeted $2 million to the state for a PERS side account or proceed with the 10-year reduction of reserve balances to help mitigate future increases. I would just take the regular side account off the table. If you're going to do it, you would want to do the EIF, which gives you a 25% match of the $500,000. Again, you don't have to contribute the full $2 million. There is no wrong answer. This is, do you want to use this more as a long-term solution and set up a side account and have it go over 20 years? Or do you want to deal with or mitigate short-term problems or issues that we're having? And I just need to, it is at your discretion as far as the date, but you need to turn over the money by March 31st to take advantage of the match. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, JC. Council, what questions do you have? Rob, go ahead.
First, do you have a towel? Because I'm a little wet from sipping from the fire hose. That's a lot of information. But there's no numbers on the slides, but the alternative 10-year plan reserve thing, I got a question on that one. Yeah. So, one of the alternatives to, you said, use the workers' comp reserve in odd years to help combat other personnel increases, medical, dental, vision, et cetera. So on what do you base the fact that there's going to be increases that the city will be on the hook for? Meaning that, isn't that up to different bargaining groups, the end result of different bargaining sessions and so forth? I mean, how do we know that the city will have to pay these increases for medical, dental, vision, or whatever? We're not on the hook for that now, going 10 years into the future, are we?
You're not on the hook, but contractually, that's how it reads as far as the percentages that the city pays versus what the employee pays.
Well, contractually, but those contracts, they end at some point. They're not 10 years out, correct?
That is correct. That would be something through bargaining that if that's something that you wish to change the percentage breakdown, I'm guessing it would have to be negotiated at the table.
Sure, thank you.
Joel.
Well, I just had two questions. First, if I understood your presentation correctly, good presentation, but it's a fire hose. So that's a good thing, I guess, because it means that every information is there. Some of it drips out on the ground and I don't catch it. In this year's budget, we had $2 million budgeted for a side account. Is that correct? Okay. In addition to that $2 million, then we also have the workman's comp thing that instead of holding our own reserves, we're going to go with a private contractor, which frees up the need to maintain that reserve being self-insured.
Kind of, yes. We changed companies and it changed the way our plan works. And so,
Okay.
yes, the way you're thinking of it is correct.
So, okay, then the third question is the rate of return between the two. It seems like the rate of return with the side account is much more than the rate of return for the what do you call that second option you talked about?
Like the 10-year kind of plan.
The 10-year plan. But then it also seems like in exchange for that increased rate of return that's projected, We then lose control of that, whereas on the other one, we still maintain control year to year, and you can make adjustments if we foresaw the need to do that. And with both of them, future negotiations takes part, so that's a constant under both alternatives. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, and so again, there isn't a wrong answer in this decision.
Okay.
It's more so, do you view of mitigating a short-term issue and or problem, like the potential $1 million increase we're gonna have in PERS rates in this next budget? Or do you want to turn that over to the state and we get a discount based on their investment returns over the next 20 years?
And that would be starting out at about 300,000, going up to 500,000, and then going beyond that, according to that one slide. It would be multi-year.
Yeah,
That difference is the return and the reduction in rates by the investment of that money in the side account.
correct.
Okay.
And so again, it's a long-term plan here. So if you make this deposit, it's like a CD. You can't touch it until it matures, which we won't get this money back because it's amortized, but
Sure,
That's the way it worked out.
there's a sizable difference in the rate of return also.
very much so,
Yeah.
as they project.
Yeah,
And they
right.
are going off of that 6.9%.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I think for this, we're not doing budget committee questions, but you can offer public feedback when we open the public hearing. Brian?
Yeah, thank you, JC. Sorry I'm late. So just to try to distill this down, because it is a lot of information, and I'd like to pretend that I understood it all. But so basically, the difference between the two options is if we give the money to the state, we get essentially a $500,000 bonus. But then the state is investing the money. And then if the other option is we hang on to the money, we don't get a $500,000 bonus and we invest the money. Is that more or less?
You can look at it that way, but we would also be using that probably to offset future increases. So we would slowly diminish that use as well.
Okay, so if we held it, we would be drawing it down. What's the average rate of return that the city might see on that money?
So currently, we're at about 3.3%. So at $2 million, it's not a lot of, as far as interest that would make.
Okay, and then you said the state average return?
They project to be 6.9. If you look at their history, they do pretty well above that 6.9. But I always heed with caution, because even though they seem to be doing well, our PERS rates continue to go up.
What does that have to do with the rate of return?
So in theory, if they're making enough to what they are paying out, then our PERS rate should stay flat. So they're paying out more in retirement than they're actually making, which is why our rate keeps going up.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Joel?
So if I understand PERS correctly, then that rate will go up regardless of which alternative we select? Because that applies to both. Is that correct?
Yeah, they keep saying that it's going to go down, and again, with Tier 1, Tier 2, they think as they exit the workforce, that'll lead to it going down. But I haven't seen that in my short tenure of working for city governments.
So neither option really is going to reduce the rate, is what I hear you saying.
I think you're going to get a similar end result. It's just what control you have over it. So we will get a discount rate back from the state with that side account versus us having the money and creating our own kind of discount.
Other questions? Okay. This is a public hearing, so we will, if there's anyone from the public who wanted to speak on this, you have 3 minutes. If you could stand up and come to the podium here.
There you go, it's ready for you.
The 2 million was in the budget for prior year, correct? That's what we discussed? Okay, I just wanted to understand that, thank you.
Correct, and it is appropriated and is available. There wasn't at the time of last May that it was, yes, we want to do this because we were on the waiting list for the EIF.
Right.
And we weren't going to be able to take advantage of that and or need to wait to take advantage of that.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, it's a little confusing here with our committee, but during public comment, we just generally don't ask questions. You know, it's just an opportunity. You could ask a question, and if the council wants to repeat it, they could do so. Anyway, is there anyone else who wanted to speak on this issue? All right. Oh, Tom, step on up to the mic here, and you have 3 minutes.
So I don't know, maybe I misunderstood. My understanding is that we had solicited a request from the Budget Committee members, or as a whole, to give us some advice on this.
I think they have that opportunity here.
Okay, but I don't think that that's a limit to 3 minutes.
Oh, okay.
They were invited, right?
I think they are kind of invited, but Tom?
I think most folks know that I'm an advocate for establishing the side account. I think the 25% match is a very important addition to the city's assets with PERS. There are many public employers in Oregon who have side accounts and who have had side accounts over the years. In fact, the recent count is 223 different public employers in Oregon that have set up side accounts. Among those is 25 cities. The wait list that was established 3 years ago was based on the city's application for the 25% match, with the commitment from the council at that time that the $2 million would be added to the side account when the match became available. The city was number 27 on a list of 44 employers on that wait list. And that includes a lot of familiar names. The University of Oregon, for example, pledged to invest $90 million in a side account so that they could receive a $15 million match. The reason that side accounts are so attractive is not just the higher rate of return from the Oregon Investment Council, but also because the side account is considered an asset. And when the actuarial calculations are made, that asset reduces the unfunded actuarial liability. And the reduction in the UAL is actually a bigger benefit for the actual assessments than is the rate of return on the investment. The rate of return is an important part of the way PERS is funded. About 74% of benefits are paid from investment earnings. So the benefit of a diversified portfolio managed professionally that includes investments in real estate and real estate in Oregon gives the city the advantage of earning very attractive rates of return on an asset that at the same time reduces the unfunded actuarial liability. So in the chart that has the rust-colored banner, there is a column that shows PERS assessments and another column that shows PERS assessments with the side account. And they're different numbers by quite a bit, several $100,000 each year. And the cumulative total savings from the side account is $3.9 million. If the side account funds are retained as an internal reserve, there will be no savings. That is, the internal reserve will simply be used to help offset the charges to departments by having an internal billing rate lower than what is actually being paid. So the side account helps to bring down those assessments. And while there needs to be a bridge between the current internal billing rate and ultimately the full assessment, I believe there are ways to replenish the PERS reserve internally and cover that bridge while also establishing a $2.5 million side account. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Anyone else from the public who wanted to speak on this? All right, we'll close the public hearing portion. Rick, do you have a question?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
JC, I think it's hard when we're looking at $500,000 as a bonus from joining the side account, which I think over the 10-year period, that'd be short of 2.5, almost 3% return on our investment. Do we have the opportunity to see that type of return amongst ourselves? In other words, the city investing the money, the same amount, the $2 million? Or are we, I mean, investment today is a very treacherous road, so I don't know if the first account has more flexibility.
Hopefully I respond in a way that of what you're asking. So if we currently earn about 3% on our investments, that's about $60,000. And so to get that $500,000, it would take us about 8 years potentially with this $2 million to get to that approximate $500,000 level. Does that kind of go with what you're asking?
Yes, whereas the state would take basically is indirectly is 10 years. Is that appropriate?
I think so. You're kind of cutting out a little bit there.
Okay, so you said we can do 3% in 8 years, and by doing the side account with the $500,000, would that be equivalent to 8 years as well?
No, it'd be slightly different in how that calculation works and the amortization back. So the way to think of this is we got a free $500,000 bump if you go with the EIF, and then that gets amortized within that. So the two slides, am I still up? Just to show the side by side, this is the $2 million without the $500,000, and you can see that we only make it to $3.1 million over the 20 years. And then with the free money, as Tom pointed out, that gets you to about $3.9 million over the 20 years.
Okay, thank you.
Joel?
Yeah, it's hard to compete with a 25% match year one. The other thing I was wondering was the carryover and our cash flow. So this $2 million that was budgeted, and if we spend that or invest that, we're not spending it, we're investing it to lower our rates, get the 25% match in year one, and take advantage of lowering our future rates even more. What does that do to our carryover balance for next year? Does it, or is that already taken out? Or so my question is if we invest that amount in the side account, are we going to be below the minimum values in any of our, like general fund, the 30%?
Hopefully I'm answering this correct the way you're asking it. So if we turn this $2 million over to the state, we will not have that cash in our reserves, and we're projected to be right around using all the way to that $2 million line. So we wouldn't have those cash reserves at that point if we were to turn it over to the state. So there isn't an excess, I guess, is that what you're asking?
So there's no effect then, if I understand what you just said, there's no effect on turning that money over in terms of our cash balance and our minimums in our general fund?
That is correct. But what it's going to affect is the ability to discount this next budget and give that credit back to the general fund because the PERS rates are going up. And so that's going to be about a $670,000-ish hit to the general fund in potentially the next budget.
But that would be the same under both options then, am I correct?
Say that again?
That would be the same under both options, I would guess.
Correct. The rate's going up
Yeah.
whether we turn it over or not.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I think we're ready to move into discussion. Anybody want to start? DJ?
Yeah, I see wisdom in the EIF investment. It's hard to say no to. I think a long-term investment is going to be better for us in the future.
Brian?
I agree with you, DJ. I think as a municipal government, we should always be looking at probably the long-term benefit because this, this entity is going to go on indefinitely. So I honestly don't even know why we're considering the short-term option.
Dwayne?
Just make it short. I agree with everything. I'm going to agree with Tom. I think he knows more about this than I do, and I would like to take his advice and everybody else's and do like I do, invest my money in for the long term.
What level of decision do you need on this today? Do we need to make a motion or?
Yeah, if that's the overall sentiment, then a motion would help, and then I will bring a resolution back for the March 1st. That way it becomes more official.
Okay. Dwayne, did you have something?
I was going to make a motion if you want me to.
Go ahead.
I make a motion to go with the EIF, is that right? EIF fund with the $2 million investment.
Is there a second, Brian? Discussion? Nope. Okay. Dwayne, you made the motion, so how do you vote?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
DJ?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
And I don't think we have Valerie out there, do we? Okay, motion passes 7-0. All right. Thank you. Thanks to our Budget Committee members for being here today as well. Next up on our agenda, we need a motion. We're going to set a record here on motions to adjourn and reconvene, but we need a motion to go back into the workshop now. So adjourning this special meeting and going back into the workshop. TJ, you look like you want that.
So moved.
Seconded by Joel. Thank you. All in favor of moving back into the workshop, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. We are back in the city council workshop. And parking is on the agenda, parking code.
All right, Mayor, Council. I'm here to talk about vehicle storage and parking on public streets. Now, my presentation's relatively dry because we're talking municipal code. So now that you've been drinking from that fire hose and you're all wet, now is an opportunity for you to towel off because this is pretty dry information, but I want to give you the foundation so then you can have the informed decision on parking. So this is a council review of the city's municipal code pertaining to vehicle storage and public parking on streets. My presentation, primarily just to give everyone the same foundation, is to go over and then have a discussion if you need any clarity on what our current code is when it comes to parking of vehicles on public streets. The municipal code, and this is all under the municipal code section 6, storage and parking on public streets of vehicles. I'm not a big fan of reading all of this, but I think I probably should read this so we make sure that everyone is on the same page. But here it goes. A, no person shall park or store or permit to be parked or stored a vehicle on a street or other public property for a period in excess of 72 hours consecutively. Movement of a vehicle on a street or other public property for a distance of less than 300 feet shall constitute continuous and uninterrupted parking or storage in the same location. So what that means is someone can park a vehicle in front of your house or in front of their house or whatever for 72 hours. And if they are longer than 72 hours, they would need to move it at least 300 feet to be and that's sort of where we are with that. Failure to move the vehicle for 72 hours constitutes a storage of the vehicle, and there is also enforcement procedures with that. Vehicles found to be in violation, we do have the ability to tow and impound. So the 300 feet, I think, comes from, in the ordinance, are normal city blocks as they were first formed in Grants Pass. And now city blocks are different sizes in different communities. You go to Portland and some of their blocks of the Old Town Northeast are larger. Ours are basically 300 by 300. And so that's likely where you got the 300 feet in the code. So if a vehicle is parked here, and they were cited after 72 hours, they would need to move 300 feet, which means they would not be able to be on this block. They'd have to go maybe over here to this corner or something along those lines. So the municipal code continues, focusing on storage and parking on public streets of trailers and other personal property, not just vehicles. In addition to the restrictions listed above, no person shall park, store, or permit to be parked or stored trailers or other personal property on streets other than public property between the hours of 5 p.m. and 6 a.m. And it is very similar in nature to the vehicles where they are for a period of in excess of 72 consecutive hours, they'd have to move them also 300 feet. And they are subject to towing and impoundment just like the car vehicles. The municipal code continues with regards to impoundment. Any vehicle can be impounded if it creates risk of imminent harm. We could do it immediately without the 72-hour notice. We also have a section in the municipal code for parking of oversized vehicles and trailers. And oversized vehicles can be, no person who owns or has custody or control of an oversized vehicle shall park or store any such vehicle on public property, on public streets, highways, or right-of-ways within or adjacent to a residential or commercial zone or any public parking lot within the city limits of Grants Pass or other specified posted prohibited parking unless otherwise authorized by the subsection. Oversized vehicles include but are not limited to, and this is an important definition, all motorized and non-motorized vehicles, trailers, semi-trailers, vans, trucks, open bed, flatbeds, mobile equipment, equipment trailers, machinery, motorhomes, campers, camp trailers, or other vehicles which meet one of the following criteria, and those are primarily in size. Oversized vehicle trailers continue and states that loading and unloading a person's property shall not exceed 15 minutes. This is relatively, I think, not necessarily germane to the discussion today. Parking in motorhomes, trailers, coaches, recreational campers, camping trailers, boat trailers designed for personal use for less than 48 hours is allowed in a residential district only if the vehicles are parked immediately and completely adjacent to the property which is owned or rented by the owner or operator of the vehicle, and the vehicles are not closer than 30 feet from the driveway of an adjacent property, and the said vehicles are not violating any other city ordinance. So that's specifically associated with basically recreational RV type of vehicles. They do have a few more restrictions when it comes to where they can park in residential zones. So we also have carved out within the city a few areas where we do allow oversized vehicles and trailers to park. This is for the purposes of, say, you have a tractor trailer and you needed somewhere to park it and overnight. We have some designated locations and they're listed here in bullet points on E Street, on F Street, J Street, Washington Boulevard, on the west side between Hillcrest and Morgan. And we've got some on Morgan Lane, Industry Drive, Mill Street, and Spalding Avenue are some designated locations where you can, and it is safe for you to, within that 72-hour parking limitation, park oversized vehicles. So that gives you a general idea, and I know you've got a hard copy in front of you so we can thumb through if you want to have take a look at any of the specific codes in here. But this really is an opportunity just for council to have a discussion, and provide any direction if you want to have any modification to any of the municipal code I mentioned. move it to additional workshop, or take no action. And with that, Mayor, I turn it over to you and council.
Thanks, Aaron. Questions? Dwayne?
Now, you said 72 hours. Is there a state law too that says 72 hours?
There is a state law that was enacted in 21 that's associated with personal property and camping
So,
that's utilized in the parks, but this, but it doesn't, but it would run concurrent or something along those lines. So it's 72 hours is what maximum a vehicle can park. Or
so no matter what,
camping.
72 hours?
Yeah.
Okay. It's not
Unless,
70
yeah.
It's
that's
not
correct.
72 hours and then there are 72 hours?
Correct.
Okay.
Other questions? Vanessa?
I'm not really understand where this discussion is coming from or why we're having it today.
Dwayne?
Well, that was a question. Why are we talking about this?
Oh, okay.
Well, we got East Park Street that has people that are parking there for long periods of time. We have industrial, there are people that are parking there for long periods of time, moving 300 feet. I could keep going, but we're not in discussion time, so I'm just saying that's the reason why.
Yeah, it came up as a council request during the budget agenda review. Rob?
You know, I understand it came up. I thought very specifically we were going to be talking about East Park Street. I thought when, at the agenda setting, that that's what we talked about, was how to solve whatever problems were occurring on the East Park area. We had the citizens who, I forget their name,
Yeah.
they wrote a letter, and they had, I think, 12 neighbors sign it, and that whole thing. My understanding is, that's why this was brought to council. My understanding is, that's what we were going to be discussing.
No, this is actually, it's a separate issue, just to clarify.
What
So,
is this issue?
well, this was brought up by Dwayne during the agenda review a few weeks back. The issue with East Park Street and the citizens' petition, I guess, we are sending out a survey to residents on East Park to get a wider viewpoint of what's going on over there. So that's actually a separate issue than this.
I think, Mayor, I think that that's a good way to put it. It is two separate issues. They were two separate subjects. One is dealing with another issue. This one is specifically just dealing with vehicle parking throughout the whole city and what our current code and regulations are, to see if council is wanting to take a look at making any changes.
Dwayne?
How many letters have we gotten from citizens on cars moving on the same street 300 feet?
I can't quantify. I know I've either had calls sometimes or individuals make requests about that. And it could be one neighbor that has another neighbor that always parks in front of their house. It could be other things. It could be vehicles on Washington Street. I don't have a real number for you, but it is something that comes up sometimes, yeah.
DJ?
Sure, slide 6. Any vehicle or other property on street, alleyway, or other public property that creates a risk of imminent harm to any person or property as determined by Public Safety Department. I think part of the complaints that we're getting is public health and safety concerns along with parking in certain areas. I think it's fair to say, whether it's fluids or drug use, or use your imagination from there. So how is that exercised? Because I've heard from constituents directly, hey, there's this car, it's leaking all over the place, we'd really like to get it moved, et cetera. So is this twofold? How is this assessed, and is this being utilized as a way to move vehicles?
So there is that discretion in the field associated with what they see here or what we're responding to. And when it comes to the imminent harm, so one example of what would be considered imminent harm would be, let's say we got a complaint about an RV or a camper or whatever in it somewhere, and we notice that it's leaking gray water or it's leaking brown water. That would be definitely a public health issue. And so we could address that, and that would fall under this category of being able to impound immediately. There are some gray areas that really, it's tough to sometimes make a call. A vehicle that's leaking a little bit of oil probably wouldn't be there because it's not a health risk to the community. It has an issue with our system, say, for instance, our stormwater system or wastewater system, but you'd need to look at, so I don't have a clear black and white answer for you because there's that.
Dwayne?
How many sightings, we'll just pick industrial, have the CSOs cited for vehicles moving 300 feet?
I don't have that number, but we could try and maybe get that number for you. We would just need to be looking
Or
at how many
Fairview,
vehicles
or
we
I
cited.
can name a bunch of streets. Fairview is one of them too.
Be a better question for the chief. It's possible that we could ask for the CSOs to go back and review their citations for a period of time.
Okay.
I have a question on the 72 hours because it doesn't, I guess if it's illegal to park beyond 72 hours, but an officer wouldn't show up. I mean, I assume this is mostly complaint driven, so a neighbor's going to point it out, but it really kind of needs to be 72 hours from the point that police or parking are aware of the situation, right? Because if I just called and said, hey, my neighbor's been parking on the street for 5 days, nobody's going to show up and immediately cite them, right? So they're going to show up, and then it is 72 hours from the point that the police or parking officer became aware that the vehicle was parked?
Yeah, that's true, Mayor. We would need to document, okay, this is when it's noticed, and then they've got the 72 hours.
So it does kind of end up being more than 3 days? Or could, unless you reported at the very second that somebody parked, right? Augustus?
As a practical matter, it's going to be more than 3 days anyway, just because the police aren't omnipresent. They can't be everywhere at once. So it's possible that they'll catch something in a different area of the city, and then they'll catch something the next day, and then the next day. So just practically speaking, it's never going to be 72 hours.
Right, that's what I mean. It's like 72 hours from the point that they get involved somehow. Rob?
Well, I guess, when you say that the police are involved somehow, to me, that's really the issue here, because I'm quite sure there'd be thousands of cars around the city that have not been moved in 72 hours. So we get into the area of selective enforcement. How are we actually identifying which cars should be? Now, we've got the example earlier with possibly gray water leaking. Okay, so that's an imminent hazard, possibly to the biological hazard to the immediate area. But to just go with a 72-hour limit when thousands of people are doing that around the city, and you go to selectively enforce a few that you don't happen to like, to me, that really is a rabbit hole.
Are there any other questions? I think we are in discussion now. Go ahead, Dwayne.
Thank you.
Since I brought this up, I'll just tell you the people that complained to me, I'm just going to use industrial because it's probably the worst street that I've had to deal with. There's cars in there that are moving 300 feet every 3 days. It's cleaned up right this minute because I've talked to CSO. I think it was not last Monday, the Monday before, I was going to go check at the warming shelter, but I left the warming shelter and I went over to Industrial Street, and we have a chronic van that's finally gone, but it has rats in it. It's been reported to the city. No one's done anything until she finally moved it, but it's had rats for months. She moves at 300 feet. I actually go there, and she's walking the paces of 300 feet of that vehicle, and she just moves it back and forth. And that's all they were doing on Industrial, is moving up and down the street. Never leaving the street, but leaving their motorhomes, their trash, their sewer waste on that same street. And that's happened to all other places in Grants Pass. That street's actually 2,107 feet because I willed it because I have a will because of my job. And so they know the rules, And so they're just continuing to bother the neighbors. They leave all their trash there because they're camping in front of the people's places for more than 72 hours. Sometimes it's a week long until the CSO gets there. So that's where I see is that this 300 feet is really not. And then you have on East Park Street, they're moving from, I'm just going to use some names here, Johnson's house to the Smith house, 300 feet, and then they move back and forth because they know the 300 feet rule instead of being like 2,500 feet. So then you get these complaints because these people are staying long periods of time with not a car that's going to work, but we'll just say living there in front of their house. I mean, the CSOs are pretty busy, but you know, that's where the complaint really came from of the people I've talked to is long-term parking on that street and just moving up. The lady that I saw with the van, she was towing at 300 feet. It didn't even drive. So that's where I came at this is maybe we discuss moving the distance a little further so they're not, because we have some very long streets and most of these vehicles are not staying in the neighborhoods, they're staying off streets, so.
Anybody else? DJ?
Yeah, so it seems like we have a readily identifiable issue, but what we need to do is find out an amicable solution if there is one. Have you thought about what it is that you would like to see change?
I think that we need to move it to 2,500 feet. This is what I feel this should be the moving. It still gives time to rest. People get to park their car. Fairview is a very bad street too. They do the same thing on Fairview. They'll park there and they'll just move up 300 feet. Small buses, motorhomes, whatever else, their vans. They do their three-day rest period and they move on. I don't think 300 feet is enough. So I think I would like to see the ordinance moved up to 2,500 feet. And I think that would be almost every street. And I don't think we're targeting every person, or we're just looking at people that are long-term parking that don't live in that neighborhood. That's what I look at. I mean, most of us are not going to call our neighbor because they parked in front of my house, or my neighbor's car would have to be leave, you know. I think it's the long-term parking, living on those streets.
Rob?
So I guess in the interest of fairness, I could understand, Dwayne, what you're saying, to basically just, I would say, sarcastically spread the wealth. We haven't solved any problem, we've just spread the wealth. In other words, it's just not in front of the same people's houses all the time, it just spreads out a bit. I mean, I guess that's somewhat reasonable in a sense, it doesn't solve anything. But it solves a problem for the immediate person that has someone in front of their house for too long, but it doesn't really do anything except spread it out, right?
Can I answer him? I don't think you could, due to the laws in the Oregon, I don't think we can tell someone to leave the city, you know, but it does spread the wealth out. There is businesses, if you go to, industrial's cleaned up right now because the CSOs have been really hitting it hard, but they know that that's a street that you could stay on for time because it's mainly businesses. Well, the businesses should have long-term parking out front too with people camping, whatever else. East Park Street's the same way. They should do their time and move on. Now, if they move to a different street, then we can't control every street, but someone complains, then we'll tag them, you know. So.
Valerie?
Yes, we had a very similar problem up at the end of Oregon Avenue for years with, and it was a game of tag and then wait and then they'd move it and then they move it back. I mean, it went on for years. So I think they've really learned how to use the system. I agree that it's not really solving an issue, but maybe it's a beginning of solving an issue if we have it more spread out and we look at what we're going to do with people in the situation who are living out of their cars, because obviously it is an issue that needs to be addressed. But I don't think, and I especially feel bad for the people on East Park because they've been waiting for some sort of resolution or for some sort of discussion for a long time. I think it's probably been 6 months since they brought it to us, and I would feel, I feel bad that we haven't more in a more timely manner, addressed it. I hope that that letter has gone out for the survey, as was mentioned, but I don't have any guarantee that has. So I think to have that discussion with East Park is imperative that we have that now. We should have a lot of information from them and their thoughts. And I am in support of spreading it until we can find, until it rises to the occasion that we can find exactly a place for people to go.
Aaron, did you want to give an update?
I was going to give an update that, yeah, we are finalizing, working on the survey. The direction to do a survey, though, was only given about 3 weeks ago. So we've been talking about, or hearing about the issue for a while. But and I want to make sure that we're clear that the discussion that we're having right now is in the municipal code and parking. It's not designated for a certain class or a certain issue, but we're talking about the whole parking across the whole city. So I just want to be clear that we stay focused on the municipal code as is associated with parking.
I do have a question about that because obviously downtown has some shorter time limits where people are only able to park for a few hours, but I think you're also able to move your car 300 feet in the central business zone, and then that counts as does that restart the 3-hour meter if you move it 300 feet? Like, is there a whole different section of code that applies to downtown specific?
Code, and I don't know if it's associated with feet or not on movement. I'd have to look that up.
Okay, I'm just wondering if, with regards to changing from 300 to 2,500, if that would have any bearing on what happens downtown, or if it's just a totally separate area. Okay, sounds like it's a totally separate area. DJ?
Sure, my shot from the hip reservations would be unintended consequences and excessive legislation. You know, rules should be designed and people want to follow them. I'd be cautious of kind of reactionary legislation and unintended consequences, but I have to say that we clearly have an issue that needs to be addressed, and I think having the information from surveys in different areas of town is really going to help us nail down what we decide to do about this issue.
Vanessa?
I don't have any interest in changing this code. The council recently had an opportunity to address the root issue, and I understand what you're saying, Aaron, but the spirit of this discussion was brought forward on the basis of homelessness. So the council had the opportunity to act on that issue comprehensively. They chose not to. They chose to give to a nonprofit that does not, in the majority sense, serve homelessness. So until we do something serious about the root issue, I have no interest in changing this.
Any further discussion? Joel, then Rob?
Well, I think it's good that we're putting out the survey, and I think we need to wait until we get those results back and see. I know it's been affecting my neighborhood down by Oak Lane, but the folks didn't just move 300 feet. They took care of the issue, the owners of the car. And they didn't use the law to circumvent it. They acted in good faith. But there's other places I know that people aren't acting in good faith for whatever reason. So I think we need to wait on the survey and then see if the issue is ripe for discussion.
Rob?
So just very tangentially, because downtown was mentioned and whatever, I had a question for Aaron, if you could follow up. I know the chief's not here. So the downtown seems to have lost its parking enforcement officer. He's been promoted or basically became a police officer. And I don't know that there's been any replacement. I don't think that there has. So if you could follow up with the chief and let us know, or maybe you know today, if that is in motion or progress or whatever.
Yeah, we've had recruitment and interviews for that position, so we're working on that. In the meantime, filling the spots, the CSOs will sort of go back to what we're doing. We try to appoint someone. We've got others patrolling the area, but we are in the process of recruiting.
Dwayne?
I'd be in favor of revisiting this after we get some information from how many people have been ticketed, the survey, getting some more information from obviously Chief Pensman about this, and then have another discussion. And I think the people should weigh in too, the public. I mean, what do they want?
Okay, well, at this point, it doesn't necessarily sound like it has enough traction to go forward to a business meeting, but if anybody interested in moving it forward to a business meeting?
What I'm hearing, Sarah, is the people wanting to get the survey and get on top of the East Park and then have another discussion after more information is at a workshop. So
Okay.
I'm not in favor of moving it forward to a business meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree with that. And just to be clear, the survey, everybody, is very specific to East Park. It's, it's not addressing other neighborhoods because they had a very specific request. So it's trying to gather more information from more residents on East Park. But yeah, we'll have another follow-up after we get more info on that issue. If you have specific statistics that you would like to get, talk to Aaron and the chief, and we can address this again. All right, any other discussion on that one today? All right, agenda review. We have a business meeting Wednesday. So we have a public hearing on a comprehensive plan amendment for element 11, council action item to increase the city manager's purchasing authority, a resolution that would adopt the strategic plan, a resolution that would award the Portland Loo installation contract, and motions for finding effect on the medical marijuana text amendment proposal with Redwood Tower, a resolution for a street sweeping contract change. And then we have next Monday off, that's President's Day, and then we would have another workshop on the 27th where we are scheduled to discuss level of service for our public safety, both police and fire, sale of city-owned property, and potential parking regulations related to the climate-friendly and equitable communities rules. And that gets us through the month of February. Any questions about any of that? Aaron?
I want to do a shout out for when it comes to the public safety discussion. If there's any specific information you're wanting us to cover in that presentation that we haven't covered or something you want us to focus on, please let us know. We're looking at giving you as much information as possible, and we'll give it to you in advance so you'll have it there, and then ultimately have a discussion to where we can potentially focus on level of service and what level of service we'd be looking at trying to fund, and then the funding options. We have asked for consideration of a utility fee. Council's asked for some additional information with regards to, well, what are the ranges of what other utilities might be going up? We'll have some information for you on that. And so that's sort of going to be the breadth of the presentation, ultimately looking for direction from council. So if there's something I'm missing or something that you want to make sure that's included, please drop me a line and we'll make sure we have that included as a discussion point.
All right, anything else you want to add going forward, DJ?
Yeah, for public safety, hopefully you were just using that utility fee as an example, right? I would expect levy is certainly something that we still need to talk about, right?
We're going to have all 7 options
All 7 of those options.
as an option for discussion. Yeah.
Okay, very good, thanks.
All right, anything else to add at this stage? All right. How about don't get too excited to leave. We have an executive session. How about a motion to adjourn adjourn the workshop and move into executive session? Joel?
I make a motion to move to executive session.
Thank you. All in, second, I guess. Take a second. Vanessa, thank you. All in favor of moving into executive session?
Aye.
Say aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
All right. We will now adjourn the workshop, and the council will now meet in executive session.